Brent,
What's up, dude?
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man.
Hey, man, so I'm so excited to have you here today because we were talking about this earlier for our listeners abroad. And first, we're going to talk about the importance of comedy. They say laughter's the best medicine.
Agreed.
I've been following you on the internet, and I found one of your videos with Gavin Newsom imitation. The one where you go, I love it.
Thanks, man.
And concordantly, then my team had also been working with you, and we created a wonderful partnership.
Yeah.
Which has been great because we really believe that as a health company and something that we've got it everybody's all stressed out and all freaked out, and it's been a very tough environment for comedians.
Yeah.
So let me get a little background on you. Tell me, how did you get started into the comedian world? How do you decide to become a comedian? Because that's a tough gig.
It's definitely not something I wanted to be in the NBA. I still do. I still think I could be in the NBA one day. That's a dream. That's a dream I will never let go of. I will never let go of that dream. But I remember when I was a kid, like my mom raised me on Chris Farley and Will Ferrell.
Black Sheep,
yeah.
My favorite.
Yeah.
The Car Crash.
Oh, it's insane. And Tommy Boy was like my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
And so I remember just like kind of absorbing that and just thinking it was so funny, and then like reenacting bits from those movies whenever I was around family or friends. And then in high school and college started doing comedy videos, and then moved to LA. And just like everybody else that moves to LA, I thought I was like, hot stuff. And then I looked around and realized, I kind of suck at everything. And so that motivated me to get on stage. So then I was on stage doing improv, sketch, stand-up, and making videos at the same time. And it all kind of just coalesced into what I'm doing now, which is all those things, with less suck, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, if you suck really bad, you'll go to politics.
Right, exactly.
I want to talk about that, that journey, I think, as a creative artist. And so many people, I think, have a creative side to them, but that gets beaten out of them through the education system or shut down. How did you find the courage to kind of follow through and, go through and earn your chops? Because it's not easy being, you can be funny with your friends and television jokes, walk on a cold stage and be funny. That's a big jump.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling it courage. I think it's stupidity. But thank you for boosting my ego by calling it courage. I feel courageous.
Well, courage and insanity.
It's more insanity. It really is. It's really like a stubbornness. You have to be so stupid to want to be a comedian. You have to be so dumb to think I'm going to go out there and all these people are going to pay me attention and be quiet while I talk. And they're going to laugh at me and give me what I need. It's very, very selfish. So the courage comes from just stepping onto the stage. Beyond that, you just have to be an idiot. And I say that with a lot of love behind it, because there's still a lot of I think that what the number one biggest fear for people in America is public speaking. And so to want to do that for a living and make money doing that is something you really do have to have a little bit of courage for. At the end of the day, you got to be hard-headed and stubborn, but you also have to have a little bit of courage. And I think the courage for me, or the stubbornness, I guess, or a mixture of both, came from my competitive side, because I played sports my whole life. Basketball in college and competitive sports my whole life, still do. And so I think it really clicked for me within the first couple of years of being in LA, where I was like, I'm back on the court now. This, you know what I mean? Everybody around me, I can hang out with these people. They're all my friends, but they're also the other team, And how am I working hard to be the best version of myself that I can be, knowing everybody else is trying to do the same thing? So for me, it was that sports competitive side that kind of flipped a switch for me.
It's interesting. There's a lot of comedians who have kind of athletic histories or something and are quite competitive. In fact, I was hanging out with a friend who's connected with Joey Diaz, and Joey was over and he was talking about the comedy scene here in LA, and he's like, dude, this is murderer's row when you go down to the comedy club. You're like this and this and this, and he's like, it's insane. Of course, unfortunately, he moved out with the whole COVID thing. And of course, there's all these kind of connections. But How important was it for you to kind of find mentorship or where your guidelines, like how did you make that jump? Like, is it in sports we go, oh, I want to be like Kobe, or I want to be like LeBron or Magic Johnson, or, you know, whoever it happens to be. And that's usually a natural inclination as kids, and there's a mentorship stuff. But how did you find that in the comedic career? Like, is like what inspired you?
You know, the parallels between, for me, I can only speak for myself, but the parallels between the sports world and the comedy world are so significant. Because in sports, you know, you look at Kobe Bryant's game, it's almost move for move Michael Jordan's game. Because Kobe was watching Jordan religiously when he was growing up. And then Kobe started adding his own touch, his own flavor to it. But there's a video online that you can watch right now where it has side by side Kobe and Jordan. And it's like minutes long, and they're doing the exact same move in the exact same spot on the court. And it's because he absorbed that when he was young and just starting out in his career. He was looking up to the GOATs, the greats. And so for me, it was very, very much the same. You know, I did the same thing in basketball. I looked up to Kobe and Jordan. And then when I moved out to LA and I got really involved in live performance, I was looking up to people that were just crushing on stage. A couple guys, like I was looking up to Chris D'Elia when I first started, Brent Morin, Fahim Anwar, who's now out in Austin. Those guys were like the funniest people to me. And so I started, and Jim Carrey, back in the 90s, I was watching all his specials.
Amazing physicality.
Crazy physicality, yeah.
He does
and so I started like taking on little pieces of that just subconsciously, because when you're watching something, it's like you're studying game film, right? And so I was watching all these guys perform nonstop. And then within my first 2 years, I started having people come up to me like, hey, you're really funny, dude. You remind me of this guy. You remind me of this guy.
Right.
And then I was like, I appreciate that. I was like, you know, I really appreciate that, but I don't want to remind anyone of anybody. I want to be my own guy. So I actually stopped watching a lot of my favorite comedians that I felt like I had similarities to, just because I wanted to start forming my own pocket of like performing abilities and style, you know. So that's where I'm at now. I'm still trying to do that.
That's really cool. Now, of course, comedians are an interesting group of individuals. First off, and you said that they're stupid, but I don't think that's true. I think most comedians are really intelligent because they're able to look at common elements.
No, you just have to be stupid to want to be a comedian.
And then they find kind of that element of truth that's got to thread through to make something funny, to expose maybe the self-talk or the things that you don't say or these type of things. Is there a way that you are able to extract that out of life? Because there's kind of like a common element that's neat, but kind of like a new juxtaposition that emerges. Like, how do you? I'd like to know how you decode that communication to what is quote unquote funny, and then what makes it maybe not funny. Because I'm sure you've been on stage, hit a joke that you think is the best.
Oh yeah,
it bombs, and you're like, you know, what happened?
Right. That's you're asking about the chemistry of comedy now, which is really interesting. And I love talking about this because it's cool when I watch comedians tackle a premise or a topic, and I'm like, where are they going with this? And then they pull something out of it and they say like a sentence, and the words of the sentence are so perfectly aligned and delivered that the meaning just jumps out at you and it forces you to laugh. And it's this weird alchemy of like cynicism meeting cleverness and wit, meeting a specific person's sense of humor. And you put all those things together and you give them a topic and they can pull from it something that no one's ever thought of before. No one would ever think to say that sentence that this person just said for the punchline, right? And so when it comes to like actually writing a joke, I personally don't sit down and try to think like, okay, well, how can I make a joke about, CrossFit? What can I write about CrossFit? It's more like in the moment of being at a CrossFit class and seeing a trainer be like super hardcore and then playing like crazy dubstep music. Then I look around, no one's laughing at this guy. So it's
that becomes funny.
It becomes funny, yeah. And it's like, for me, it's been a conscious practice of always trying to keep a third eye open to see something that maybe other people aren't seeing, in the hopes that I can take that thing that I saw, that moment, that behavior, that thing that this person just said, and turn that into something funny that could be shared by a lot of people. So it's been a conscious practice of trying to keep my mind open so that those moments can come to me. And I think when folks aren't comedians, they're not constantly thinking like that, because why would they? It would take up too much brain power and they drive themselves crazy, constantly breaking down every moment that a certain person is doing or that a certain person is saying. But for a comedian, that's why a lot of them are crazy, because they're so open the whole time. So everything is flowing through them, and it's a wild, roller coaster.
I'm also interested because some people, there's a comedian that kind of turns on and turns off, and then there's some people that kind of just, that's who they are, all the time, and they come into different types. I can remember one day I was walking up the street in Vancouver, where I lived for many years, Canada, and I was walking behind Chris Rock and two of his friends, and he's having a conversation with them, and I was just kind of like walking along, and it sounded like he was on stage, there didn't seem to be any connection. Yeah. But then you'll see maybe a Joe Rogan, which is like Joe Rogan in an interview, versus Joe Rogan when he's on the UFC,
right, it's bigger,
or then when he's on a Netflix special,
right? And
there's like different personalities. Which do you think is easier to do, having the different personalities or getting into the comedic personality, or is it just something that cultivates with the personality?
I think it flows in and out of a combination of both of those things, and then one of those things, and then the other thing. And I feel like every stand-up comedian is a version of themselves on stage, and the great ones are 100% themselves. They like Bill Burr would be talking to you like this, and then he would go on stage and he'd still be talking like this, and he'd be saying the same things that he says to you on a podcast that he would say on stage to 10,000 people. And then others, play a character or whatever, but there's pretty consistent mix between being oneself and being a heightened version of oneself on stage, I feel like. And that's still something I'm trying to figure out. Like, I'm definitely, as far as like time goes, I'm still very new to this world. I'm not even 10 years in to doing stand-up. So I'm still trying to navigate that and figure out how to be myself in certain moments on stage, and then what moments where I need to actually be a completely different person on stage. So it's fun to navigate, but there's a good mix there as far as what people do on and off stage.
One of the things that I've noticed that's emerged, and of course we'll get into some of the challenges that I think are happening in the world of comedic relief, especially during this kind of highly charged cancel culture world, is that when I interviewed JP Sears, he said that he was in I think it was in Philadelphia, he was in a comedic club, and you kind of write who was there and everything. And he said there was a thing on the wall from Dave Chappelle, who a lot of people think is one of the greatest comics ever, that said, "Keep telling the truth." And JP, who you do work with a lot, you guys travel together, you have a good relationship, and we've developed a wonderful business relationship as well, because I really believe we need to support free speech. We need to support satire and humor, especially in such dark times. But now we're living in this world where everything is canceled and everybody is ultra sensitive. How do you navigate that as a comedian today, both on stage and then in this new medium, which is like YouTube and social, like Facebook and all this, which is, can you describe the difference and maybe how you navigate that?
Yeah, it's the first step, I think, is knowing that you can't please everybody.
Yes.
And you never will. Yeah. And that's a lesson I really had to just nail into my own brain early on. Because I always wanted to please everybody. I always wanted to do jokes that were like green, middle of the road. But you can't. It's impossible. Because trying to please everybody will make you please no one.
Right.
So then it became, okay, let me just be myself and do the things that I think are funny. And then that transformed as the world changed over the past few years into this hypersensitive, hyper-politicized space that we're living in now. And so now navigating that, for me, has become actually really easy because I know exactly what I want to say and how I want to say it. So I found this groove where I know I'm going to not be bringing people on board from time to time. I know by saying what I think is true or calling out the BS that I think is BS in the world, I know that's going to make some people mad. And I actually like that because I'm staying true to myself, and everybody that likes me for saying what I'm saying is going to like me even more. And granted, the stuff I'm saying isn't that crazy, you know?
Right.
Like, I'm not out there trying to cause a rally. I'm not bringing insurrection number 2 to fruition. You know what I mean?
Is it only number 2, or is it?
I mean, it might be a number 3 by now.
Yeah, but they have to do these in trilogies.
Right, that's true. It's got to be directed by Steven Soderbergh. And so navigating it now has become a process of ignoring negativity, because there will always be negativity, whether you're making fun of people on the left or the right or politics or cancel culture or whatever the hot button issue is. There will always be negativity and people trying to drag you down. And then focusing on fulfilling yourself. Like for me, whatever I make, first and foremost, I'm making it for myself. 100%. I do it for me.
Right.
And after that comes my audience, family and friends and everybody else. But if I don't get this thing out of my head,
it just keeps
I go crazy.
Right.
I have to do it for me. Drake actually has a really good, as cliche as that sounds, he has this great line from a song where he says, if I was doing this for you, I would have been done years ago. I'm doing this for me now. There's something like that. I'm ruining the line. But the lyric is like that. And I always thought about that because it's like at the end of the day, I'm really, if what I'm making is fulfilling myself and it's making me laugh first and foremost, then I know I'm succeeding. And I know that like-minded people will gravitate towards me. And I'll just hold the faith that happens. And I think what a lot of people are doing now in their attempts to navigate this space is they're doing things to please a certain demographic. They're doing things to pander to a certain group of people rather than speaking their truth and allowing like-minded people to come to them. And I think that creates more division. I think it creates worse content. And I think it doesn't develop dialogue enough with people. And I'm not saying, I'm not like, my silly, dumb comedy isn't intended to create a national dialogue, you know what I mean? But
it isn't?
I mean, it could. But like the people or the companies or the late night shows or whatever that are creating content and pieces of media that are specifically targeted for a very specific demographic while ignoring an opportunity to like tell the truth in a funny way, they're creating more division in my mind. And they're creating unity within their little demographic of people because those people just go further and further into the echo chamber.
Yep.
And then you look at people like my buddy Ryan Long, who's a really funny guy. Some of the stuff I've made, some of the stuff JP has made, where it's very like, this guy's kind of got a point here.
Yes.
And I love that because Ryan Long and JP and myself have all found this way to create things that speak to our own philosophies about what's going on, and we're allowing people to gravitate towards us. So I think self-fulfillment is really the number one way that I try to navigate everything, is just staying true to myself.
You know, one of the things I've noticed in the comedic world is there seems to be a variance between stage and then I would call, now we have this new medium of the internet, and then we have kind of like the commercial, the Bill Maher type stuff.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is there's a difference in those mediums, right? The stage, you're getting feedback live.
Yeah.
So there's a certain energy that comes from it. In the Facebook world or the YouTube world, you can kind of craft and edit and build out a joke, because there's parts where you're playing 2 or 3 different characters, and things like that, which is unique, which is you're almost crafting almost like a mini show.
Yeah.
And then you get into kind of like the corporate world, and what's interesting I've noticed when if you look at the, you know, the stand-up comics that are now are reading their traditional monologue and they have the writers in the poshy place in LA, that's really become very tired, old, negative, and predictable. Do you think that many of those comics who are super talented and creative and have all this ability and work their chops through that whole thing, they get to that kind of cushy tower, but so many of them, like, it seems like they've sold their soul to the corporation. Do you think that's a risk because that corporation has got to fit everything within their corporate media sponsor stuff, and does that take away from the manufacturer? I know I asked a lot of questions.
No, I get it. I catch the vibe.
Yeah.
Here's what I think about that, and
I don't want you to screw up the big fat contract.
Oh yeah, that's definitely coming soon.
That's coming soon. Yeah. I know you have to toe the political
I'm in the run for the Tonight Show. No, but you know, places like the Tonight Show, I've really thought about this a lot too, because the Tonight Show was like a dream of all dreams a couple of years ago, and now the dream of all dreams is like to do what I'm doing now, but at the highest possible level on my own. Although I would love a shot at the Tonight Show. Okay, if you guys want to give me a shot, I'll pitch you some ideas. But when you get to a place, I feel like in entertainment where you're under a corporate review system and a standards and practices system, that's all created because there's a constant flow of money. They have to keep their advertisers on board. And who's watching those shows? People in the Midwest, people in Idaho, South Dakota, you know what I mean? And nothing against those people, but it's like people in the middle of the country, you know, that are home every single day, like, and get a lot of enjoyment out of watching the Tonight Show every single day. You look at the target demographics, you'll see this. And those people gotta be entertained. It's easy to consume entertainment. It's easily digestible, and it needs to exist. It really does, because there are a lot of people, God, I don't wanna say anything like mean. I'll say what Tim Dillon said. Okay, I'll quote him instead. Right. Tim Dillon, fantastically hilarious comedian. He says, and this is not a quote, it's a paraphrase, but he said, you know, there's a lot of simple-minded, stupid people out there, and they need to be entertained too. And so if that means Jimmy Fallon has to play, you know, birthday hats with Chris Evans, Captain America, in a late night segment, and that's what they're going to call comedy, let that happen, okay? And then they can all go to sleep at night and wake up the next morning and be robots. That's what Tim Dillon said. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I think that speaks to your question of you know, does it get to a certain point where the comedy is like the soul is sucked out of it? I think there's still soul there because you really have to be enjoying it. You look at Jimmy Fallon, who I absolutely love, and that's his style, man. He enjoys it. He's so middle of the road, like silly, slapsticky. You know, no one's going to remember the games that he's playing on The Tonight Show 10 years from now. No one's going to remember that stuff. But in the moment, it's helping a lot of people get through their day. It's bringing a lot of joy into a lot of living rooms in a lot of places across the country. So I think it's definitely necessary. But where I get worried is where people start to turn against entertainers or comedians who don't want to do that, who don't want to be part of the corporate system, who say, oh, I don't want to, like, that looks terrible. That's so stupid. Why would I ever want to be on that show? Look at what they do. They force you to pander to this side of the political aisle. I don't want to be on that show. That's so stupid. And then that person gets shot down for being like a racist Trump supporter or something crazy.
Right.
And so I know I'm jumping all over the place, but like the corporate system of comedy, from my perspective, is a necessary, not evil, but it's like a necessary thing because so many people enjoy it and it's a consistent flow of money. But I would hate to see that become the end-all be-all for what gets shared with the general public, which is why I love that people are going to things like Patreon and Rockfin and all these other Odyssey and all these other places outside of the typical YouTube space where they can create content and share it with the people and find their own audience so that they don't have to rely on NBC anymore. And that's been a steady evolution of people not having to rely on places like NBC. to create content and find an audience.
Well, let's talk about that too. Is like when we're dealing with like YouTube and Facebook and these other social media platforms, and then of course you got Patreon, which is people kind of reward financially directly. And the other one is through getting enough following that you can support yourself with ads and sponsors and products and stuff that you like to associate with. Where you see the comedy going in social media stuff with cancel stuff? Because have you had it?
Dude, I just got
stuff canceled.
Oh, bro! Yesterday, my YouTube channel got suspended for 2 weeks.
Okay, tell me about that for a second. What's that about?
So I posted a video a couple of days ago. Me and my buddy, we do this series of characters where we're two like, bro, dude, bro, what's up, bro?
Oh yeah, you did the mushroom one.
Yeah.
That I absolutely.
Like, what's good, dude?
Yeah.
And so we have like a running series with these two guys that are like conspiracy bros. They're like really into like the crazy stuff.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, and so we did this video that came out a couple days ago called When Conspiracy Bros Go to the Doctor. And in the video, we're at the doctor waiting to get the vaccine. And we're talking to each other like, bro, did you hear like Bill Gates put chips in this, dude? They're trying to put chips in our bodies, dude, like Pringles chips, dude. They're trying to put Pringles and Doritos potato chips in our bodies, dude, control us like little puppets, dude, so that they can put more fake birds into the ecosphere, dude. Like, that's what the line was, right?
Which is a conversation that's happening at Ear One on any given afternoon. Right? You go to the lunch counter right there. That's what the conversation is.
B, we said Pringles chips. And you can't get more objectively silly than saying a needle is going to inject you with a snack food. So they took it down and said we were spreading medical misinformation.
Which is insane.
Which is crazy.
So
then we dug deep.
Yes.
So then I dug deep with a buddy that I work with who has ties to YouTube. And we dug and we dug and we dug. And they said, it just could be interpreted by somebody as being factually true. That's the exact response we got. So that means that YouTube takes it upon themselves to decide what people's interpretation could or could not be, and blocks people from creating their own interpretation of a piece of content. And to me, at the foundational element, yes, they're a private company that can do whatever they want and they're fully within their legal rights. But the slippery slope that begins of censoring comedy and enacting, like abusing your power to either allow or not allow somebody to create their own interpretation of a work of art or a silly video. It's an abuse of power. It's a breach of social responsibility. And to me, it's a definite free speech issue, even if it's a privately held company. Who are they to decide what is and isn't comedy? And so my channel got suspended for 2 weeks. And so now I can't post for 2 weeks.
Wow, that's, and of course, your economic viability is...
that's 4 videos, yeah. A couple of them with Bioptimizers ads that I got to push to the end of April now, which is a bummer.
And of course, then it's like now you're back to that situation of like, well, could this potentially be interpreted? Because a lot of the best comedy is the comedy that's going to have the biggest application or influence to a field would be something that would be very common to that. So, i.e., there's a massive conversation about COVID, about vaccines, about medical innovation, alternative stuff, and it's tied into politics, it's tied into economics, it's tied into all these things. You come out talking about a funny video to, putting Pringle chips in people's brains.
Yeah.
And that gets cut off.
It gets cut off.
One of the things, over on that wall, I have a book called The Gulag Archipelago. And the fascinating thing about it is one of the things that happened in the Soviet Union was all of a sudden comedians were not allowed to say, you were not allowed to make jokes about the government. You're not allowed to say certain things. And that was also echoed inside Nazi Germany, which was they were trying to go against Hitler rose to power because they were trying we need to move away from communism, so let's try fascism. And 100 million people died. Right. Whoops. And then you saw the same things happening in the Cultural Revolution in inside of China, and then you saw this happening also spread to Venezuela. You saw it spread to Cuba. You saw this happen in Cambodia, and here we are in the 2020s, and it seems to be happening in America. How do you deal with that as a comedian and as someone who your whole basis of existence is foundationally founded upon free speech and the freedom to make unusual, maybe avant-garde statements in a way, because anxiety and comedy are actually the same neurological reactions. They're actually the same thing. So if I feel kind of anxious, a comedian's always kind of dancing on that line. It's kind of you go, I can't believe you said that. Oh no, right? They're going, I got him.
Got you. Yep.
So where do you see this all going? Do you see it pulling back? Do you see it increasing? And how do you plan your career around that?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
So it's interesting because it's so hard to predict, right? No one would have predicted that we would be here 5 years ago. So who knows where we'll be 5 years from now? Will they ban anybody that makes a joke they don't like? But what's most crazy, just taking from this specific example that I gave, is that the content in question is something that you would assume YouTube would like, because we're actually mocking the extreme anti-vaxxers, right? The people who actually think there's a microchip in the vaccine.
But even with that, just as an example, that means that you need to be a proponent of the vaccine. They've kind of taken that position.
It would appear that way. You would think, but then why wouldn't they let that video live if it's mocking the people that they're against, right? Why wouldn't they let that live? And so how it'll evolve, I don't see it letting up ever. I think as soon as the president got kicked off Twitter, we talk about unprecedented. That's objectively crazy to me. I mean, regardless of whether or not you love Trump, I'll make fun of the guy until the day I die. And all politics aside, removing the president from Twitter is nuts. So when that happened, I was like, oh, this will never get better. It's either going to stay how it is, or it's going to get worse very slowly. So how I see it is a lot of people are going to start alternative social media sites, and I pray it will balance the power out. But Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are so deeply rooted in power grabs and monopoly type mindsets that I would predict that they would do everything in their power to ensure that it is never a level playing field. Playing dirty, buying people out, and then dropping the company completely, which they've done before. I would assume that happens, but I really am rooting for the good guys here. And I see little sites popping up here and there that are new types of social sites, new types of fan to creator interaction places. So I have high hopes that the playing field will balance out and more people will be able to put content on different platforms, especially, to be honest, as the whole blockchain world starts to be more incorporated. As blockchain technology starts to be more incorporated, I think that's going to create new avenues for creators to get their content to people. Well, like we're seeing it with NFTs right now, kind of, which is like a crazy fad.
I saw your video on that recently.
Yeah. But it's so yeah. I would hope that it starts to level out. But I would not be surprised if these bigger companies continue to try to ensure that it didn't.
Yeah, I have some deep concerns as well because we're always trying to navigate the policies and advertising and things like that to communicate with people. And there's a couple things. I know tens of thousands of conservatives leaning reporting stuff also got wiped out in concordance with that. So I thought that was interesting as well. It wasn't just the president. There was like all these other associated people.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them.
And branded as, people against the state or people against the population. And I think some really unfair applications, whether you like the personalities or not, there's a bigger issue at large. And the other thing I think is interesting, and speaking to that, I know one of the guys that got wiped out was the guy by the My Pillow guy, who's kind of a funny guy anyway, Mike Lindell, who's now starting a new platform called Frank.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just saw it the other day.
Trump is supposed to be starting a new platform.
Well, I think he's probably
probably the same.
I mean, Trump was probably the biggest source of comedy for the last 5-6 years.
He's the funniest president.
I was looking at the ratings of the regular networks, and since Trump's gone, like their ratings are all going down because there's so many people that hate this guy, and like who is Luke Skywalker without Darth Vader?
Right.
Right?
Totally.
You need a great heel, and I think he played that character, and people bought into that as an idea, and he actually played the media against it, which was a kind of an interesting marketing move. Mm-hmm. But then maybe those networks kind of understood what happened. It's like, okay, we need to stop this guy and maintain hegemony. And I think in a digital world, Peter Thiel talks about it in 0 to 1, where there's a certain point in the way digital technology goes geometrically that companies just kind of become these breakaway dominant forces, whether it's YouTube or Netflix or Disney or PayPal. Or there's a breakaway point that happens in all of those businesses, and now we have Apple entering into this play, and and now they're starting to war with Google, and all these different things. So I'm curious though, as a consumer of comedy, and I've taken it upon myself because I can get very serious and locked into numbers and spreadsheets and roles and things like that running a company, but when I'm hanging out with my friends, comedy is a big part of it.
Cool.
Life. I like to laugh, and I think it's the best medicine.
Yeah.
How do you think the best way for consumers to navigate this world to ensure that we keep the voices of comedians out there to say whatever they want to say? Mm-hmm. Because I think I'm of the opposite opinion, of where everyone's like so walking on eggshells about race and gender and sexuality and all these sort of things that I really don't care how much melanin is on somebody's skin. And I'm not, just the social economic gap has always been there from all kinds of people, and people hang around generally the same 5 people are friends, but that's another thing. And then I don't care who someone sleeps with or wants to or identify, it doesn't matter to me. But those in themselves can be kind of funny.
Yeah.
So how, as a consumer, do you see consumers navigating this market? Because at the end of the day, if in a capitalistic system, we have to talk about that, the consumer drives the market.
Yes.
But now we're starting to see
the corporations are driving the market.
Right. So how do we navigate this as consumers? Do you have any thoughts about it, or does any of your friends and your colleagues in the industry understand this?
Yeah, it's I think it's a numbers game, right? So if you're really, really popular on Instagram or YouTube, you can tell everybody hey, from now on I'm putting all my stuff on Patreon. That's it. I'll post here to let you guys know when I post on Patreon. And then people will flock to Patreon. And that's where it's going to come down to people really investing in the creators that they love. Because the more and more people branch off on their own and start to do make their own content away from the traditional places like YouTube and Facebook, the more they're going to really need the support of people. Because right now it's easy to click like on Facebook. It's easy to click subscribe. It's hard to type in a new website and go, oh, I don't know, I don't recognize this website. You got to click login, you make an account, you got to enter your card information. What is this security code? I got to choose the traffic lights, and it becomes like hard, you know? And so it's going to, we need that, dude. We need that. As creators, we need the people who support us to double down on their support if we're going to be doubling down on trying to break out of this corporate system of greed and arguably censorship. So that's what it's going to come down to. I personally don't want to have a career on the internet. I can't wait to stop making videos for YouTube. Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Because I want to do bigger things. I want to make movies and shows and
like a whole
things,
comedy
specials,
movie
albums.
Or special.
Yeah, yeah. And YouTube is fun because I have a bunch of silly, fun, short sketch ideas. But I mean, 10, 15 years from now, I don't want to be making YouTube sketch videos. It's a phase that I'm absolutely loving, and I'm so passionate about it, and I love it so much because it's helping me develop as a person and a performer, and it's helping me develop my opinions on different things. But it's gonna get to the point where I'm like, I'm still doing this. God, I want to like keep growing, keep evolving to the next thing, right? So maybe that becomes creating longer form content and putting it out on a completely new platform that springs up from all this madness, right? But from a consumer standpoint, it's just going to take a lot of doubling down on the people that you love. And we're seeing it because people like Tim Dillon, Theo Vaughn, Ryan Long, all these guys have Patreons and they're making bank. They're making tons of money because their followers followed them to Patreon because they weren't making, well, you make crap money on YouTube. You make barely any money on YouTube.
Exactly.
They take so much of the ad revenue.
Yeah.
So I love seeing that because it speaks to your point of what are consumers going to do. Well, they gotta double down on their support, and they are doing that. I think true fans and your real audience will follow you wherever you go.
That's cool, and I know I'm on the opposite side of it. And one of the things that we've looked at is, sponsoring up and coming and successful comedians to put advertising in it so we can associate good humor, good fun, being able to laugh at ourselves and help advance people's careers, economic. That's how we're doing it from a corporate side. So for anybody listening that has a message in a site or relative to it, I think it's a great thing to carry on to people such as yourself in the creative arts. It is a creative arts industry, and if you look back in humanity, we remember the buildings that people built, and then we learn about the culture, which are the people from the artists. So we remember the engineers and the artists, and everybody else kind of fades into the dot.
That's so funny.
It's kind of interesting when you look at that. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the difference between creating series. So if you look at a guy, I think maybe one of the most successful comedians of all time is a guy like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a guy that's fighting and doing the gear, doing the grind, handling.
Guys, that's drink 2 for the second mention of Joe Rogan on this podcast.
So we see that, and then he got to the position where he got the FU money.
Yeah.
And what I find a little worrisome is I always listen to Joe on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's like I watch you on YouTube, I watch JP Sears, there are other comics that I'm interested in. I usually catch the clips on YouTube because I can get a little segment, I get a little sampling of this person. I'm like, this is funny, something entertaining. He's moved over to Spotify as a talent, but now it's really hard to see Joe Rogan. Like my Spotify account doesn't work that road. It's clunky.
The video is weird, yeah.
And then he smashes it every now and then, does these big Netflix specials, which is like a totally different deal.
Yeah.
So can you maybe map out how you see a career going? Because people kind of know.
My own career?
Well, just any career. you know, as basketball, you start out Little League and you go into high school and you go to the NCAA and then maybe you get drafted or you go to Europe for a while, then you get on a team and blah, 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 blah. And it's very like, you know, football or any other sport, you know, in a business career, you got out of school or whatever, you start an entrepreneur, that's clear. But as an artist, do you think it's more clear now what the possibilities are or less?
Well, I think it's more clear. The possibilities are more clear, but I think the possibilities are so diverse that it's impossible to plot. It's like choosing a bracket in the NCAA tournament on day one, right? It's like, oh, you have all these roads, all these different things that could happen leading to the championship. And you fill out a bracket, and then you get like half of them wrong, but you end up with the championship, right? So it's clear because there's so many people doing so many different things. You got people making millions on podcasts. You got people making 6 figures a year on YouTube videos. You got people doing specials, doing commentary, pitching their own show, hosting a talk show on Hulu or whatever. And so there are all these different mediums and avenues. So it's clear, but it's impossible to predict. And I think when you start predicting is when you kind of are more likely to fail at your prediction because you're not open to any other course of action, right? So like in my early years, I had a prediction. I was like, I'm gonna do this, I'll be here, and then I'll get this.
Right.
And that was it. I had it written down, dude. It was a
pathway to
path.
Success.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
None of those things have happened. Okay? Not a single one.
Yeah.
So, but it forced me to be open, and so now I love what I'm doing. I'm so happy with what I'm doing, right? Of course, I go down on myself. Life is ups and downs, but with where I'm at, I'm very grateful, and I love what I'm doing. So, and it was also clear to me that this could be a possibility. So there's just so many different avenues, and they're all clear, but it's impossible to predict, you know? But yeah, the traditional route for a lot of stand-ups has always been like, okay, do open mics, get in at the clubs, become a touring headliner, and then go on tour for a year, release an album, and then go on tour for another year and hopefully get a 30-minute special on Comedy Central, and then that can get you known by Netflix, and then get an hour-long special on Netflix, and maybe like a couple festivals in between. And so that's always been like the traditional route. But again, that is heavily reliant on the industry. And so now what we're seeing is a lot of comedians like Sam Morrill and Mark Normand, both super funny comics out of New York. They self-produced their own stand-up specials, and they released them to millions of views. And they made a bunch of money that they didn't have to give a chunk of to Comedy Central.
Right.
You know, so it's like, and they had I remember reading a tweet, maybe Joe List was another guy. One of those guys was like, yeah, you know, we shot this special as a pitch. Because typically you'll shoot a special in like a dingy club or whatever just to get the material on tape, pitch it to Netflix. Netflix will say, this is hilarious, we get what you're doing, let's shoot it at a theater, right? They pitched it to everybody. Everybody passed. So he just put it out and it got millions of views and everybody loved it. The audience loved it. The internet loved it. And so that's what we're seeing now. Is you don't have to rely on these industry people to tell you whether you're funny or not. You don't have to rely on corporations to tell you you're good enough or not. If you know you're good enough, then go make the thing and put it out. And that's becoming a brand new, well, it's always been there, but it's becoming a much more defined possibility for a lot of people in the comedy world now. It's just doing it on your own and not waiting for someone to give you permission.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I think another piece that I think people are curious about, and I asked JP about this too, is like, how do you structure your production of comedy? Do you have a set schedule? Do you write at a certain time? Do you, so can you break that down for people? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, you're just a funny guy. You just like walk down the street and just instantly come up with these things, but it's not.
That's it. Yeah, I just walk in and then it pops into my head and I'm like, ha!
I'm so jacked in. As soon as you say that, I'm done. Right? Blow it apart.
You know, ideas come sporadically. I'll write down an idea on my phone and then I'll bring it to the computer the next day and I'll do some free writing for a few minutes. I have a whiteboard at home with a bunch of Post-it notes on videos that are being written, that need to be shot, and that need to be edited. So that's kind of like my visual flow so that I can have something to look at in the real world. I don't have to keep it all locked in my head. And then writing-wise, it totally varies. Seinfeld used to do this thing, and he probably still does, where he would just sit down and write for 1 hour straight, and he would write pages for an hour, and maybe he'd get like 4 lines that were good enough to bring to the stage, and maybe one of those lines would work. Out of an hour of writing, he'd have 1 sentence, right? And so then he would bring that back, and then he would write about that line, and what else can he come up with? I do that from time to time.
Do you write with a pen, or do you write with a computer?
Typically a computer, because I can write faster as thoughts come to me. And then sometimes I'll just walk around and improvise in my apartment alone. I'll put on a wig. I'll just play a character that
Does that help?
Yeah.
Right, you become that.
So I can just drop into whoever it is, and I can try to find the essence of that person. So, and that's fine, because then if I say something funny, then the real me will be like, oh, all right, I like that. And then I'll be able to write that down. And so the creative process is wildly varied depending on what the bit is or what the project is. But there's always some element of improv to it, whether it's improv writing, I'm just going nonstop, like a free flow of thought, or I'm walking around talking to myself. I'm heavy improv based.
So when you're on stage and let's say you've rehearsed your jokes and your timing and your punchline or something, does sometimes like something comes in and you get the feedback that you just start running with it?
Oh yeah. That's so fun because I'll say something like, I'll just have a thought, even on a joke that I've done a million times. Sometimes a new line will just pop into my head and I'll say it, and if it gets a good reaction, I'll start laughing and I'll just keep going. I'll follow that trail until it kind of sputters out, and I always record it. So then I listen to the recording after the show and I can write down the new thing that I thought about when I was on stage. So I always leave the door open to having new spur of the moment things happen on stage. Because I think that's the biggest part of the magic to me, is when things sporadically come to fruition in a moment of performance. Really, if you watch really good improv, like at UCB or Groundlings, really, really good, like the best improv to me is the highest form of comedy. There's a lot of bad improv out there, though. Right. There's a lot of bad improv. But the best improv, because it's so in the moment, the performers, the players are so quick, they're so smart, they're operating on the same frequency, dude. It's crazy to see the things that like great improvisers come up with. And so since I started in the improv world, I keep that with me. And so I try to train myself to just allow, like if I have a thought, I don't bottle it up for fear of it not working. I'll say it out. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, we move on. It's not the end of the world, Whereas on the opposite side of that spectrum, people like Seinfeld or even Louis are very written. It's almost like lyrical, how they're delivering their material. It's word for word, every pause, every moment. There really isn't a lot of room for improv, which is great. Neither is better than the other, and there's room for both of those styles to exist. But that's kind of my process when it comes to it.
Would you say, who would you say was maybe your favorite or best ever improv person?
Key and Peele they started an improv in Chicago, I believe. My favorite improvisers that I've seen ever, no one's gonna know the names unless you're super into the LA comedy scene, but there's this girl, Mary Holland, who's super funny. She's in a bunch of commercials now. I think she's done a couple of TV shows. Insanely funny improviser. A couple other people at Groundlings that I worked with. But you're not going to be famous as an improviser. You're going to work on a cruise ship every summer. Right. You know what I mean? Like that's how you make money.
Would you classify Robin Williams as an improv? Like,
yeah.
He seemed to be kind of like...
Yeah, so he would also write, but he would go off on
lose it.
Insane improv stuff. Yeah. So when it comes to that style of like stand-up improv, Robin is at the top of the list for sure. Yeah.
And then how would you classify another guy that I really like is George Carlin?
Genius. I'm fairly certain everything he had material-wise was pre-written.
Yes.
Of
Which
course,
is kind of more like the Seinfeld,
which is
kind
more
of
the
evolved,
Seinfeld
like
type
that
way.
commentary.
Right, but even when you're writing, you're improvising because you're thinking of things as they come up. So you're improvising. I'm improvising right now, right? Like this is all our life is just one big improv dance. But his stuff was he's such a genius, dude. He was saying the stuff people are saying today 20 years ago.
It's amazing.
And like the things people are just now realizing, he was saying it 20 years ago. So he was, a god. He's on the Mount Rushmore of comedy for me, for sure.
So I want to be mindful of your time and everything. I want to just segue a little bit. So when you're deriving content, you come from your own life, and some of the stuff that you do is based on fitness and biohacking and politics and stuff. How did you get into some of the biohacking stuff, or like the comedies about that one video you guys did on the mushrooms and the cleansing and stuff? What was the title of that?
Was that the presidents on mushrooms, or was it
I forget.
Spiritual people?
The thing is spiritual. You guys were like drinking juice. It's like, I think it's clear.
Oh, the juice bros. Yeah,
the juice brothers. That was
that was fun. It's all. I love drinking juice. I take a lot of supplements. I do CrossFit style workouts. I'm taking CrossFit classes. And all my friends are like bros that love lifting. Mm-hmm. So it all is derived from like my own personal life. It's all it all has an air of self-deprecation to it.
Yes.
Because I'm poking fun at my own life. And it's just fun, dude. It's such a funny, because you can take it to such extremes with all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Biohacking is
it's hilarious. I went to lunch with a buddy the other day, and we were sitting down. We hadn't even ordered yet. And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a handful of pills, all different shapes and sizes and colors. It looked like he had omegas, some liver stuff in there. One was black, one was yellow, a bunch of white powder. He had at least 20 pills just in his pocket. And I was like, what are those? And he was like, dude, I don't even know. I just take them. At this point, I don't know what they all are, but I can't go a day without taking them. And I was like, wow, dude. So like that's an extreme, right? So that's like, I'm already making a video about that. Like the people who just love supplements and like only eat supplements, right? Because it's fun, it's funny. It's just like, you can take it so far, you know?
Well, like a lot of my friends would probably categorize it that they're taking, 100, 120, 150 pills a day. They're hooked up on electrical machines and it's the biohacking world is in that world.
I mean, I'd love to live forever. That'd be pretty cool. If I had the option to kill myself at any point, I would live forever.
Yeah. So talk about that. So your role kind of connected with you, the human, connected to kind of your spiritual perspective, all that stuff. How does that influence your comedy?
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it has such a big impact on being open-minded. Anybody that meditates will always have this air about them where they're a little more accepting of what comes and they don't fight too much against the flow of their life. You know what I mean? They pop a tire, they're not going to cry about it on the side of the freeway. They're going to fix it and move on with their life, right? So I try to meditate a lot and the belief system that I've developed over the years when it comes to spirituality or religion or whatever really helps with just staying open-minded and accepting of whatever comes my way. And I think that's allowed me to create a space in my brain to allow, like what I said before, that third eye metaphor that I made. I think that's really had a big impact, the meditation and just staying like spiritually within the belief system that I've developed. It's allowed me to have that third eye open to allow me to like see certain absurdities in the world that I can then break down, digest for myself, and recreate for an audience. Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, I'm a digestive health guy. So.
Right. So you're digesting ideas all the time.
Yeah. I totally do. Not only do we digest food, we digest ideas.
Exactly.
And, it's been great. Can you share with people maybe where people can reach you, find out more about your follow you on Patreon? Obviously YouTube is in the, hopefully. So,
it's Brent Pella everywhere. Facebook / Brent Pella Comedy, Instagram Brent Pella, YouTube Brent Pella. And I have a podcast that's like decent, so if anybody wants to listen to a podcast, it's called The Brent Pella Show.
Very original.
Thank you so much. But yeah, dude, it's fun, and I love working with you guys too. It's great. I have a whole box of supplements. That's what I take now. I think I'm up to like 6 or 7 a day.
Yeah, we'll get you up to 200.
You can get me up to
yeah,
2.
Okay.
Okay. 2, 3
open up
digits.
the world domination.
Right. This is what I really need.
Yeah, this is it. You know, but of course, I'm on world domination. So you might have to get 2 boxes.
That's wild, man. Yeah, the biohacking stuff is pretty cool, and I do find that it works too. A lot of people say it's a placebo effect when they take supplements and things like that. But
we've got great supporting data now, and I think that's what's changed.
Yeah,
we now have supporting data that can explain to people what's hocus pocus.
Yeah, what's woo woo and what's happening in your body.
Legit.
Yeah.
And it's a great world, and we're just really happy to be working with you and
Yeah.
wish you the best of success. And
thank you, brother.
Can't wait to have you back and talk more about world domination,
Dude,
digestion,
Please.
and keeping your third eye open.
Always.
There you go, folks. We have Brent Pella, who has comedy for all of us to listen to. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can smash it, like it,
smash it.
In fact, if you hate it, we like it when you hate it too. So do whatever you want, but more importantly, make sure that you take the time to support your free speech and don't be so sensitive. We need comics. Laughter's the best medicine.
Yeah, just relax. Just be nicer.
Yeah.
Just be nice to people,
Yeah.
And drink more water.
You got it. Thanks,
drink more water. Love you, bro.
Boom.
Thanks, dude.
Take care.
Cool.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.